Hello, everyone, and welcome to this latest edition of the Way Too Indiecast. I am CJ Prince, one of the writers on Way Too Indie. If you're wondering where, regular host Bernard Boo is, he's actually not here. He's gone away. He's actually at WrestleMania right now. Fun fact. So I know, right? So
who's into WrestleMania anymore? Like
Bernard
5-year-olds and Bernard. Okay.
Yeah, I feel like
we've all got a friend.
Yeah, I'm happy for him that he's going out and living his childhood dreams, and I can't wait. I can't wait for next week when he comes back and he finally answers what exactly The Rock is cooking. Here with me today on the Way Too Indiecast, we have first off, writer and editor on the site, Ananda Dillon.
Hello.
Hello. And also another writer on the site and also a reviewer. You can listen to him here, obviously, but you can watch him on YouTube on his channel Multiplex, where he reviews movies. Zach Shevich.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good. So today we're talking about, first off, 'tis the season for film festivals already, and we got a big one coming up, Tribeca, which is happening around mid-April. And you two are lucky enough to be going to Tribeca. Mm-hmm. So you two are going to throw down, what's playing there, give the listeners an idea of what's coming. And then also we're going to have a discussion on offensive movies. You know, there are a lot of movies coming out lately that are pissing people off. I think that's just how it's always been for a long time. But as of late, there have been a lot of things coming out that have really been driving people crazy. So we're going to talk about movies that kind of drive us wild or piss us off, or something we think that just doesn't, we think that we don't see why people are getting upset over it. Before all that, we're going to do the second, we started doing this last week for the first time, we're going to do it again. It's called Indie Picks, where each of us lay out a recent indie film that we really want to recommend to listeners. So, Zach, I'll let you start. What is your indie pick?
Well, I'm sort of going to split the difference between a couple movies really quickly. One that's less so indie in While We're Young from Noah Baumbach, who has made a slew of indie movies that I think we all like a lot at the site. I think some of us have varying reactions to his new one. I personally like that one. But I'm going to go a little bit backwards in history for what I've been watching recently with my indie pick, and that's sort of the collection of Errol Morris documentaries on Netflix. I haven't acquainted myself with his full body of work, but after seeing The Thin Blue Line recently, I discovered that there's a lot of his classics on there, including Vernon, Florida, the really quirky profile of this town in Florida, and then as well Tabloid, one that I hadn't heard quite as much about, but has a really compelling story at the center of it that sort of takes place in and outside the tabloids. I don't want to reveal too much about it, but it's about this woman who was charged with abducting and imprisoning a young Mormon missionary, but she interprets it as they had a love affair, and it kind of gets more twisted and interesting from there. And he has this very sort of frank style that allows people to really express themselves in really nuanced ways that you don't necessarily see in all documentaries. He has his subjects, for the most part, look straight into the camera, and you kind of feel like you know them a little bit better when you get to watch his movies in that way. So I've been enjoying his collected works recently, so I'm going to recommend all that on Netflix.
We should mention that recently, I think just very recently, Criterion put out Vernon, Florida and Gates of Heaven on Blu-ray in a nice little set, along with the Thin Blue Line, I think.
Yeah, all three of those.
Yes, and Errol Morris is just one of the best documentary filmmakers. Love Thin Blue Line. Just saw Gates of Heaven recently for the first time. That was really good. I think Standard Operating Procedure is a really underrated movie that kind of got unfairly treated poorly.
And I didn't even get to mention Unknown Known, which, I have some mixed feelings about it as a documentary, but it's certainly a really remarkable piece of, documented history in a way, with Donald Rumsfeld being the sole interviewee in that film.
Yes, and also the kind of precursor to that, which is The Fog of War, which I think is Morris's most acclaimed work. So Ananda, what's your indie pick?
So this one's been out for about a week now in limited release, and then I think also still on VOD. But it's called Spring, and it is a non-genre film, which is like one of my favorite kinds of toe the line sorts of films. But it's basically this sci-fi romance that I loved, and I know you've seen this, CJ, because your review is up on the site. But I love it when films that are genre films, and this is sci-fi, kind of are subtly so, and that you almost forget to mention that they are because it was so discreet, even though this one does have very like strong sci-fi elements and it's kind of a monster creature flick. But it's sort of like, I always reference Monsters as like one of my favorite sci-fi films that like is actually more of a character film and is about the relationship of the characters in the film. And this is similarly so. It's very much like feels more like a Linklater, like Before film, where it's a lot of talking and a lot of romance, and that you really feel like these characters are developed. And then one of them just happens to have this strange little sci-fi secret that's very Lovecraftian, I guess. And I think it helps in these kinds of films when the graphics don't like take you out of it. Like they're just jarring enough to be like, wait, what the hell just happened? Huh? I was intrigued by this movie and I was surprised by it, but also just like, I don't know, really enjoyed the actual story of it and wasn't too distracted by these supernatural elements that were playing out. So I highly recommend it if you like monster movies or if you like romances. I think both of those will be satisfied by this film.
Yeah, I saw Spring back at the Toronto Film Fest, and I really, really like. I'm probably screwing up their names. I think it's Aaron Moorhead and Justin Benson. Their last film, Resolution, which was their debut, which I think is a really fantastic horror movie. And I was really eager to see Spring. It was one of my most anticipated TIFF. I didn't love it. I think that it's a really admirable film. It's, you know, I can't really, I feel bad ragging on it because I'm like, it's doing something that horror films are just not doing, and at least they're trying, and it's doing, you know, like, sure, it's doing something that's daring and interesting. So I totally think that, yeah, like, people should check it out. I think that's totally worth checking out. And yeah, I think not only VOD, but I think you can actually buy the film and download it through BitTorrent, which I learned about, which, yeah, I think that's a little interesting, but, so yeah, if you don't have VOD and it's not playing at a theater near you, you can probably, I believe, go on drafthousefilms.com and buy the film on BitTorrent.
Yeah, I feel like now's a good time of year for movies like that too, where like you're not overwhelmed with the summer blockbuster fare, where like there's a lot more CG wild crazy movies out to take your attention away from little things like this. So, and
this has its fair share of some wacky makeup CG stuff. So yeah. My pick is actually, it was recently just it came out on this past week. It was picked as one of our must-see indie picks on the site. It's a Hungarian film called White God. I won't even try and pronounce the director's name, but it is a really unique film in that it does something that I don't think any other film has done before. The director decided to tell a story. It starts off kind of like this family drama about a girl who's left with her father. Her parents recently divorced. The mother runs off, so she's left with her father. She has a dog as a pet named Hagen. The father hates the dog, so he throws it out and abandons it. And then from there, the movie actually splits, and it focuses on the father and daughter's relationship, but it also focuses on the dog, and it shows the dog kind of wander around, make other dog friends, get taken in, and it has this crazy adventure, and eventually organizes a dog revolt. And there is a giant revolt of stray dogs in the city, and no CGI. The director got over 200 stray dogs trained and put them in the film for real. So it's a really striking image to see hundreds of dogs just running across the streets of Budapest, chasing people down. And getting multiple dogs to do this is kind of amazing in itself. So just on that alone, it's really just fascinating to watch. And it's also just, it's kind of like a nice mix between like something more art housey. It premiered at Cannes, it won awards there. But it's also kind of like a really fun B movie in a sense. Yeah, it gets really silly and but in a good way. And I would never think that I'd watch a movie and be like, look at a dog and be like, that's an amazing performance. And yet
Uggy has nothing on this performance. Uggy from The Artist.
Yeah, Uggy can go to hell. I haven't seen the artist in years, but yeah, I mean, this dog Hagen, which is played by two dogs, twin puppies, and they're great. And yeah, I mean, it's a big epic one. I know you've seen it, Zach, right?
Yeah, it's a really remarkable film, and while I do like it, I'm more impressed by it than I think it's good. But I definitely think it's amazing how much they're able to evoke through, different camera angles and tricking this dog into a performance, essentially. But you really get a full narrative arc just playing out between these dogs.
Yeah, totally disarming. And if you're a dog person, I totally recommend it. Although be warned, there will be violent scenes with dogs in the movie, but it's also a revenge tale, so you'll have cathartic scenes with dogs in the movies. That kind of evens it out.
Yeah.
But yeah,
if you can tolerate a dog fighting scene, it's worth it.
Yeah, exactly. And and the last shot is like just a total stunner. So if you can catch it in theaters, Magnolia is released in theaters in limited release. I think it's going to slowly trickle out. So that wraps up for Indie Picks. We have the collected works of Errol Morris on Netflix, Spring, which you can see in theaters or on VOD or BitTorrent, and White God, which you can see in theaters now. So that wraps up for Indie Picks. Now we're going to switch over to the main topic of this podcast, and I think what at least you two are I hope, very excited for, since you two will be covering it. Yes, which is the Tribeca Film Festival. You might not know Tribeca, you might have just heard of it, and like for me, I've heard of it, but I'm not really overly familiar with it.
It was very much in the wake of 9/11. Tribeca is an area of New York around the World Trade Center, now Freedom Tower, and in an effort to sort of bring a lot of business back down there, Robert De Niro, noted New Yorker, kind of positioned the film festival there. And sort of like you mentioned, it's not necessarily like the top tier of prestigious film festivals. You don't get the films that necessarily go on to the biggest acclaim, but you do get a lot of interesting, peculiar movies. You get a lot of emerging directors and actors stretching themselves in roles that you don't normally see. It ends up being an interesting collection of movies, usually.
Yeah, that was going to lead into, you kind of answer the question I was going to ask, which is that, since Tribeca is a kind of young fest, it's not more well-known, doesn't have the same reputation as others. I think it's still building a reputation, not necessarily that it has a bad one, but the question was basically to the both of you, how do you define Tribeca? What essentially, is there a Tribeca film? What makes a Tribeca film?
Well, I've had the chance to go to a couple of the festivals now. This, I think, will be my third year at Tribeca, and like I've mentioned, you get these kind of peculiar, different movies from people, and it's interesting, especially if you find yourself, coming across a person that you like in a interesting movie. In a way, you get people like Katie Holmes showing up on the same panel as Billy Eichner and the creators of High Maintenance, talking about digital content. And aside from panels like that, you get these really interesting movies. I know we're going to talk about some in a bit, but you have vehicles like Grandma for actresses like Lily Tomlin, and you have, Alison Brie and Jason Sudeikis showing up in, I think, a couple movies that are in the festival. So I think it's a great place to see new works from familiar faces, and you end up seeing lots of interesting stuff that maybe exists a little bit outside of the margins of the hype-driven premieres at other festivals.
And Ananda, I mean, this is your first time going to Tribeca, right?
It is.
Yeah. So, as a newbie, I mean, what is most exciting to you?
Tribeca's been on my radar for a while, mostly because I used to go to school in New York. And so I would hear about the festival and have sort of kind of kept up with like what has come out of there over the years. It's kind of one that takes a chance on lesser known. So in that way, it's very indie. You still see a few big things in there, but it's also early in the year. So it's sort of before what's going to be big, which is kind of fun. Like Sundance is just kind of seeing what's starting to get noticed right now, which makes it sort of exciting because by the time you get to some of the fall festivals, you already know what are the big ones to be expecting. But also, I'm excited to do this just because when I was in college, I used to take a day off every week and go into the city because I was going to New York, going to school in the Bronx, and watch movies in the city. And this is literally just one of like my favorite things. And I still have family out there and stuff, so I'm in New York a lot, but I haven't really just gone and been on my own and watched movies in the city. So I think this is going to feel really cool and nostalgic, kind of.
Yeah, that's another thing about Tribeca, just especially as a contrast to the New York Film Festival or all the other festivals that are thrown by the Lincoln Center. You know, those are kind of in more prestigious theaters and kind of, I don't want to, stuffy isn't necessarily the right word, but it's definitely more upscale. And Tribeca is very much in New York. You know, there's theaters in Chelsea, there's theaters in Tribeca. You get a much more casual crowd at the theaters. You get, I think, more fun movies too than the selection of films you get from Lincoln Center festivals, which isn't to, you know, say one's better than the other, just to contrast them a little bit.
Yeah, it actually really reminds me of LA Film Festival. That one is so specific to the city and is run by you know, Film Independent, who do the Spirit Awards, and like it's got such an indie vibe to it for such a huge city like LA. You wouldn't think so, but and that way, looking at the lineup for Tribeca, I've really been reminded of how it felt to go to LA Film Festival, and so I'm excited because you get to see a lot more stuff you would not really think to.
Based on, you know, looking at the lineup and stuff, I because I was reading up a little bit beforehand, and I would say, yeah, it seems like a festival where certain directors cut their teeth at, and yeah, it's definitely a more eclectic mix.
For me personally, it's great that this exists in between the, you know, end of year catching up with 2014 movies, and it's a nice surge of new movies.
Kind of a palate cleanser too, in a way, before you get bombarded with the crazy event films and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, let's start talking about the movies, I guess. You two obviously have done plenty of research and all that. I mean, you're going off in a few weeks to, I assume you're going to watch a crap ton of films.
Isn't that always the case with festivals?
Yes. Isn't it always? It's like festivals. You know, festivals are fun, but they're also incredibly stressful.
Yeah, actually, can we just like throw that out there, audience, everyone that listens to us, all four of you? Festivals are really, really stressful for press people, but they're really fun. But like, I think it'll be nice, you know, to go to a festival as just like an audience goer, where I bought tickets and was like, oh, this is a movie I chose to go to, and I just really want to see it, and isn't this fun? But
yeah, it's fun, but it's like, I remember, you know, I'd see people at the press festival like, man, I'd like to do that, and then I started doing it, and I was like, man, why did I want to do that? Like, it's like I'm seeing 5 movies a day. But,
5 movies, and then writing about every single one.
Yes, exactly. You have to try and, you know, order them up. But, so yeah, so Anand, I'm going to start with you because you are, you know, you've done a lot of research and looking into it. So what are some of the films that you're really, really, you know, like you're definitely going to see if you get the chance?
Yeah. Well, I know Zach and I have a lot of overlap, so feel free to jump in, Zach, if there's anything you're like, I need to talk about that too. But one of the ones I'm most looking forward to, and this is kind of cheating because it's already gotten a fair amount of press out of Sundance, but is Grandma, which is, like Zach mentioned earlier, Lily Tomlin's starring role in this film. And mostly excited because it's Lily Tomlin, and she's like one of my all-time favorites. Like, she's a huge part of my childhood because me and my brother apparently only watched like 70s and 80s comedies. So I mean, I must have seen all of me like 50 times, and she is a comedic genius, and I absolutely love her. And I'm always so excited to see people who I haven't seen in a while get thrown back into the world and in really good, like, meaty roles. In this one, she's playing a grandmother whose granddaughter shows up out her door, and that's played by Julia Garner, who the only thing I truly remember her from is We Are What We Are, which is one of the creepiest films ever. If you guys haven't seen that, like cannibal family film. Oh, yeah. Anyways, she shows up at her doorstep, needs a ride home, and it's kind of a, from what I can tell, like a sort of a road trip type film. And she is reeling from the loss of her recent partner and kind of dealing with her granddaughter's adolescence and all of this. And it looks like such a great character film for, especially when you put people, it kind of reminds me of like Nebraska. You put people in a car and it's kind of a great situation for them to get to know each other and reconnect and all of that. So especially when it's an older person, a younger person. There's just like life experience differences there too. But
and how rarely do you get to see Lily Tomlin as the center of a movie like this nowadays too? It's great to get a vehicle for her.
An older lesbian grandmother. That is just like amazingly awesome. I love that premise right there. Like you just say those 3 words and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll watch that. That sounds different, just different.
Yeah, I talked to someone who was like they heard about it, and they're just like, oh, that just sounds like a performance piece for Lily Tomlin. I'm like, yeah, who cares? It's Lily Tomlin. Give her all the performance. Yeah, let her get all the performance pieces in the world. She deserves it.
No, she was. What was that little? Did she do that bit at the Oscars with? Was it Jane Fonda that she came out and did that like little bit about women getting better roles now? And isn't it just so great or something like that? It was hilarious, but.
Outside of Lily Tomlin, Marcia Gay Harden, Judy Greer, Laverne Cox, Nat Wolff, John Cho, Sam Elliott. So there's a pretty good cast in this one too.
I know Zach and I are both looking to The Overnight, which just has one of those premises that also kind of intrigues me. It's got Adam Scott and Taylor Schilling in it, who are like parents who've recently moved to, I think it's LA, and and have a play date with some other people on the playground and get invited over for dinner to a couple's house. Jason Schwartzman, and I forget who plays his wife, but things start turning a little weird when the other couple starts insinuating that maybe this play date isn't just for the kids. And that sounds hilarious to me. And both, I mean, all Adam Scott, Taylor Schilling, Jason Schwartzman are all hilarious.
It's produced by executive produced by the Duplass brothers. And I mean, I'm totally in for anything with Adam Scott and Jason Schwartzman in leading roles. It seems from its premise like it'll be a lot of awkward fun. So that's one that I am very excited for too.
To keep going, I'm also looking forward to Bleeding Heart, which stars Jessica Biel and Zosha Mamet, which when I first read that, when I was looking through these, was like, what a weird pairing of people. Zosha from the show Girls on HBO, who plays the really weird, silly Shoshana. And then Jessica Biel of, JT fame, of course. But I guess Jessica Biel plays May, who is a yoga instructor, and she's kind of a very maintained, clean sort of person, very together. And her younger sister shows up and kind of brings in some chaos into her life, and May starts to sort of embrace it and get out there into just trying out some crazy stuff. So it seems I love sister dynamics, and I love female dynamics, obviously, and this just looks like it could be pretty strong.
Maybe a minor insight if you're not familiar with how press hear about a lot of movies, but this is one that we got an email about, and I think it just kind of had a really intriguing picture of Zosha Mamet. Mm-hmm. And I also just had to stop and look at that and read its premise. So Bleeding Heart's another one that I have on my list, not so much because I know much about it, but just intrigued. Zosha Mamet, Jessica Biel, what's gonna come from that recipe?
I'll turn over to Zach now. Zach, what are some films that now you're gonna frantically, I hope, rush and check out if you have the ability to?
So unfortunately, this is one that I just had the hype from Sundance, but it also released a trailer this week, and it makes the film seem much more fun than I was expecting. So I'm really excited to see Slow West, the movie starring Michael Fassbender, Ben Mendelsohn, and Cody Smith-McPhee. Yeah, he keeps showing it up in all these interesting movies, and I'm not 100% sure why, but he's always pretty good, so I'm going with it.
No, I'm with you. I'm totally excited to see that one as well.
So from its trailer, he seems like this teenager who is journeying across the frontier, and he seems kind of overwhelmed and unprepared for life in the Old West, and Michael Fassbender accompanies him, and any kind of father-son Old West dynamic starring Michael Fassbender is enough to have me interested. It got pretty good buzz out of Sundance too, so I'm definitely trying to see Slow West.
When I first saw that he was in it, Cody Smith-McPhee, and I saw that Michael Fassbender was in it, and it was kind of that dad-kid dynamic. I was like, oh gosh, is this The Road, but Wild West? I'm really confused, but I think it's a lot more than that, of course. And hopefully not nearly as somber and depressing as The Road.
No, that was what we mentioned. Like Zach brought it up. I heard of the movie slightly. I heard about some buzz at Sundance, but when I saw the trailer, I was like, this actually looks like it's funny. Like it has a lot of humor to it. I thought it was gonna be a really dead serious like Western.
And did you see Ben Mendelsohn's fur coat?
Yeah,
That is
like,
a glorious fur coat.
I have this like freaking love affair with Ben Mendelsohn as an actor. Like I think he's amazing. I don't know, like
Yes.
he blows me away. Like even in movies I don't care for, like I didn't like Animal Kingdom, but I was like, who is this guy? Like everyone was talking about Jackie Weaver and she was great, but I'm like, who is this guy? Like he blew me away. And then I saw Start Up and I was like, that guy like just single-handedly elevated the movie because his performance was so good. And anything with Ben Mendelsohn I'm going to have to at least pay some attention to. I don't know if I'd see, but even though I'm not going, there's a movie playing there that I really am interested in. I don't know if I'd see it. I'm waiting for responses to the film, but it's called Maggie. I think it's a directorial debut. It stars. I'll just describe it to you, and you'll think that sounds weird. It stars Arnold Schwarzenegger, who I guess is a widowed father or a single father. His daughter's played by Abigail Breslin. And she basically becomes a zombie, and Arnold Schwarzenegger just has to deal with his teenage daughter becoming a zombie. So I saw the trailer. It looks like a weird Terrence Malick inspired. Like visuals are very like wheat fields and Steadicam and stuff, and it's just like what is Arnold Schwarzenegger doing? Like what is going? I don't know. I'm just like how is this movie going to turn out? Everything sounds like it's like the weirdest, most random combination of things. But I'm like, I kind of am rooting for it to work out because I'm like, it's so off the wall to me. It was going to play at TIFF, but then it actually got bought up for distribution shortly before, and then they pulled the film from the festival because they only were showing it there to get distribution. So now it's premiering at Tribeca. So you guys are actually... I'm kind of envious of you guys. So I don't know if either of you are going to be able to check that out, but if you do, let me know. So
I have it on my schedule. I have it late in the fest, but it's definitely it seems like it's worth checking out as a curiosity from its premise. So
yeah, I've also got it on my, if there's time, definitely try to see this list. You can watch the trailer on our YouTube page. We've posted it there. And also, like, it kind of reminded me, do you guys watch The Walking Dead?
Yeah.
Okay, so like, I think what is it, the second season where they're on the farm, or is that the third season?
But
that's
like
the
second, yeah.
Yeah, and where there's like a lot of focus on like one of the characters of that season is really obsessed with like kind of taking care of them, the walkers, rather than like, trying to just kill them, and still sees them as people. And I always find that part of like an apocalypse of this kind to be very interesting.
Yeah, and I didn't notice the movie has a kind of a apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic vibe to it, and I didn't expect that based on the trailer. And I shouldn't have said I watched Walking Dead. I actually stopped around the second season, but I get it. But yeah, so before we move on, I mean, just quickly, any films you guys just want to throw out there as like things you're really excited for?
Yeah, there's so many good things. My list is crazy. I won't even get to see all of these. But I'm also looking forward to The Wolfpack, which also got a lot of love out of Sundance.
There are a lot of documentaries that I'm really excited for at Tribeca. There is Among the Believers, which tracks children being radicalized in terrorist groups in the Middle East and supposedly is very interesting. And then Prescription Thugs, which is about prescription drug abuse, and it's from the director of Bigger, Stronger, Faster, Harder, which was a documentary about steroids that I thought was pretty interesting. So there's a lot of movies like that I have a bit of a curiosity for. Thought Crimes, which is about an NYPD officer who was under suspicion of cannibalism. And
that one looks super interesting. Yeah, I was looking at that one.
So, lots of intriguing stories. Is Terror a documentary? I think it's a documentary, right?
I think so. Yeah.
It is a documentary. I am excited to see this one. I forget if it premiered at Sundance or another festival, but
I think it did.
Yeah, I think it's about the drug cartel or the FBI. I might be confusing this with another film, Cartel Land.
Yeah, Cartel Land's another one I'm excited for.
Yeah, both of these. See, I'm going to be covering the Hot Docs Film Festival at the end of April in Toronto, and both of those are playing there. So I'm those are on my radar. So I'm excited to see Terror. Do you remember what Terror is about then?
Yes, it got a special jury prize at Sundance actually, and it follows a FBI informant who's on an assignment to befriend a suspected Taliban sympathizer. We have to say, too, also, they've got some really great anniversary projects at Tribeca. I'm really doubting I'm going to be able to get into this, but I really would love to go to the Monty Python 40th anniversary. I mean, It's with John Cleese and Terry Gilliam and Eric Idle and Terry Jones and Michael Palin. And that is also an all-time favorite film of mine. So I would love to be celebrating there. We'll see if that happens or not. And then closing night. And I probably shouldn't talk about this because I've never seen Goodfellas.
Oh, no.
I know. And I can't believe I'm admitting that. I know this film degree holder has never seen Goodfellas. Sorry, guys. I'm sure it's great. They're celebrating it at Tribeca, which seems quite fitting, like for the location and the people behind Tribeca, obviously.
The 25th anniversary, I think, of Goodfellas. And the odd, random, intriguing part of it is that Jon Stewart is hosting the panel.
You know what else I've noticed? They're really good at pairing up people. Stephen Colbert is interviewing George Lucas in a talk at Tribeca, which I thought was like pretty fascinating, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks a lot of stuff playing at Tribeca. I think that about wraps it up for us on Tribeca. When does it start, guys?
The 15th officially, yeah.
The 15th, yes.
Yeah, the 15th until the 26th.
The 15th until the 26th. So if you're in New York City between the 15th and the 26th of April, why don't you, hop on down to Tribeca and check out some movies. Maybe you'll see Zach and Ananda. You can say hi and say you heard them. So yeah, that's it for Tribeca. We're just going to take a brief break, but when we come back, we're going to get a little problematic.
You're listening to the Way Too Indiecast, the official podcast of WayTooIndie.com, where you'll find film news, reviews, and interviews with an emphasis on indie. Follow us on Twitter at Way2Indie and like us on Facebook.
And we're back. So this is the second part of this edition of the Way Too Indiecast, and like I said, we're going to get a little problematic. We're going to talk about what I think has been an ongoing trend over the last few years of movies that seem to really offend or bother people. So Zach, I'm going to let you take the lead on this one, so you can go ahead.
Yeah, so this is coming a little bit in the wake of the release of Get Hard over the weekend, the new Kevin Hart, Will Ferrell documentary that
documentary?
Oh, did I really say documentary?
He said documentary.
If it was documentary, there would definitely be reason to be offended.
So we're talking about this in the wake of the release of Get Hard over the weekend, which is the comedy from Will Ferrell and Kevin Hart, which has been receiving claims of being racist or homophobic or overall just prejudiced and offensive. And it sort of got us thinking about what has to happen in a movie for it to register, I guess, as offensive to you, or do you bring that to any of your movie watching experiences? None of us have seen Get Hard. I don't know if you guys have seen Chappie, another movie that received some criticism for its portrayal of certain aspect recently. I haven't seen that one, but a lot of movies come under this criticism, and it's always for varying degrees of validity. So Ananda, when you approach a movie, maybe one that's already in the wake of some criticism for being offensive, how do you approach it?
I think I've definitely been sort of paying attention to all of these comments about Get Hard that have been coming out. And I think when it starts with a kind of buzz like that, I'm already going to approach the film pretty skeptically, because I don't know if other people are already saying it might be some way. I'm a little tainted towards it. So I've been curious. So when Ethan Cohen, the director of Get Hard, premiered it at South by, he opened it up to the audience to ask questions afterward, which is maybe not the brightest thing to do. But the first person who got up there, like in not so very kind words, basically said, "This is incredibly racist." And he got a little bristled. And I don't know if you guys have read his interview with BuzzFeed, strangely, who goes to BuzzFeed for news. But really interestingly, he said that he talked about how he was trying to make a satire, which this is an interesting thing, because I feel like with comedies especially, as soon as the director is just like, "Oh, it's satire," you're supposed to just accept it and say, oh, okay, you were just trying to point out all the problems in society. Got it. Cool. Everything's good. And I think towing the line between satire and comedy is incredibly delicate. And also, though, I think it's about kind of understanding where, everybody's at with these things. For instance, it's been accused of like gay panic, right? So like very homophobic jokes. And he says, well, in light of like prison culture, those jokes make sense. That's a real fear that people have. But as far as like society goes, I think we're all starting to feel like, yeah, gay jokes just ain't funny anymore. Like, we get it. They're not scary. It's, it's just, if it's sex jokes are still funny because sex will always be a thing, but gay specific, not, we don't need that. So I get a little bristly when I hear about this stuff because I want for Hollywood to be in line with like where people are at, like where are our fears and insecurities that need to be played on and need to be satirized, and where are we just like, now we're good, and now actually I don't even find that funny at this point. Which Bernard, who reviewed the film for our site, that's kind of what he said, is like, it's offensive, but more so it's just not funny.
I would say that, I can't speak to Get Hard, I haven't seen it, but on a more general level, when it comes to films like films that are knocked for being offensive and whatnot, to me it's just like, sometimes films can be offensive and get away with it, and they can find a way to be funny about it, but for me it's just primarily it has to be a question of just good comedy. Mm-hmm. I think offensive can be funny. You have plenty of people who find, they can take something offensive and find it funny. If you watch a show like Veep or a movie like In the Loop, which had people saying the most like offensive, outrageous things, most un-PC things, and yet it's completely hilarious and everyone gets it, and that's just like a really good example of a film that knows how to toe that line. When you talk about gay jokes, I think that people are getting exhausted with, because for me it's just a lazy form of humor. It's not if the punchline is essentially like the existence of gay gay people, it's not funny, because and for me, it's just annoying, because I think about something like Saturday Night Live, which I watch, and a lot of stuff on the show are just like gay jokes, and the punch and the basis of the joke is just like, haha, they're doing something gay, like they're just it's like two men kissing or something like that. Like, people
make dinner every night, but like that's not necessarily funny to watch someone making dinner. Like it's just like, okay, when something is no longer taboo and you're kind of like tapping into like people's like, ooh, I don't really know how to feel about that yet, so I guess I kind of want to laugh about it. Yeah, we're good now. Like, I know how I feel about it. It's fine. Like, who cares? And do you think also that we're a little bit more forgiving of like certain genres? Like,
comedy,
I think
definitely.
Yeah, right? I mean, nobody's getting too uproarious about like horror films and the like envelope pushing those go to. And
well, a good example would be like It Follows is getting some criticism because they don't like the way sexuality is portrayed in the film. I think that's a misunderstanding by people having seen the film. I think that they're not really. I think it's a two-way street. I think people are not understanding what the film is trying to say correctly, but it's also, on the other hand, the film is really not communicating its message properly, which I think is why the miscommunication is happening. So but horror movies, they get their share, but I think it's because horror movies are obviously kind of given this reputation of being on the lower rung of the ladder, of the cinematic ladder, and comedies, especially like a big studio comedy, like Get Hard or any Adam Sandler movie, which is always offensive to some degree. The Cobbler is another movie that just came out recently, and I just reading about it, I was like, this sounds so bad.
Yeah.
Adam Sandler needs to pretend to mug and intimidate someone, so he pretends he's a black guy. Like, it's just like, ugh, like, not good. But once again, I can't, it just sounds bad. I haven't seen it, so I can't really say anything.
Intent is the big thing that you see in a lot of these. Like, when a movie is kind of a little more facetious, like a comedy, and or it's trying to shock you like a horror, you let it go to some of those places, I think. And if it's not succeeding and it's coming across as lazy, we react negatively to it, the way that it seems to be that, Get Hard, a lot of people are upset. Not only is this offensive, it's not funny, and if I'm not going to laugh at it, maybe I should get upset about something. But for me, I'm almost more offended when I see it in a movie that's claiming to be about something serious or take itself seriously. Some of the portrayals in The Help I find a little bit problematic, to be honest, and in Blindside. Where the general white savior trend that runs through heartwarming movies it feels regressive, and it just feels lazy more than anything to me. And I mean, I guess addressing the straight white male elephant in the room is that a lot of these aren't against my particular group, so I might not be as sensitive to it as other people, but I feel only kind of offended when a movie is trying to communicate a touchy message and is doing it sloppily and sort of messing up its own point. The way that, you know, it seems like a lot of the criticism of something like Chappie seems valid in that sense, where it has an idea and it's failing at communicating that because it doesn't seem to really understand what it's portraying.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's exactly how I feel when I see certain kinds of like female tropes like played out in movies, where I'm just like, God, are we still doing this? Like,
right.
We now have sort of established like chicks don't act that way, or like we wouldn't do that, or we don't need to be the butt of the joke here. Like there'd have been a more obvious joke for sure. There's been a lot of like back and forthing about Cinderella, right? Like this silly Disney movie. And I've been kind of staunchly against this film, mostly because there's nothing wrong with the Cinderella movie, a Disney remake of a Disney film. Who cares? Except that like, we don't need this anymore. I feel like we've moved past this. Like, if I had a daughter and all we had for options at the movie theater that maybe would interest her is something like Cinderella, well, screw that. I don't actually want to expose her to that. Like, she doesn't need to believe that, like, being good and kind and nice to people is going to get her what she wants in life, or that, like, it's going to fall into her lap even, like Cinderella, and, like, that, you know, love at first sight is, like, a thing. I don't know. It's just all of these really old ideals. And I would like to hold Hollywood up to some sort of higher standard. And I want them actually, I want to feel respected as a viewer, I guess, is actually, I want to feel like they're trying.
I have an issue because I feel like, I mean, yes, people go on, and it's always a position that it always, what I'm going to say sounds very familiar to, you know, everything's too PC, or there's an outrage culture or whatever. But I feel like there is, definitely for websites, you know, they want to, you know, that type of thing will get people talking and get people, you know, viewing and clicking. So that's just that people, you know, I feel like there are some instances where I'm like, okay, you're kind of reaching here. Boyhood is a prime example of people who were reaching. I mean, someone put out a piece that said this movie is like Birth of a Nation and compared it to Birth of a Nation repeatedly, and I was like, that, like, I said, I was like, I said it when it came out. I was like, that's like master level trolling. Like that's like Armand White would look at that and be like, my God, why didn't I think of that? But I want to talk about, because you're talking about, you know, like female portrayals in films, because I want to talk about the film that launched 1,000 think pieces, which last year, which was Gone Girl. Yeah. And, you know, how you feel about that? Because that was a film that I felt like a lot of the criticisms towards it as being, you know, regressive to women. It was misogynist. It was kind of a male rights activist fantasy and stuff like that. I think it was so wrong. It was just a wrong way to interpret the movie. I just feel like people were not understanding what the film was doing. It was operating on a level that I think was aware of that and above it.
Yeah, I mean, I loved that movie, and maybe it's because I read the book, and I think I understood it a little bit more deeply because of that. But no, that character seemed to me like a perfect example of a woman who knows exactly what she's doing and is manipulating the way she knows that men will behave towards certain behaviors to like use them and to like manipulate people's impression of herself. And like, I mean, I got into many debates with other women about this, even, who were just really offended, you know, about the whole crying wolf on rape thing. Even like that was a real big part of the film, that they were just like, I can't believe that any movie would want to perpetuate that like fear that women have already of going forward and talking about these things that happen to them. And I'm just like, don't you get that she knew that that was the perfect thing to do? That like talking about being raped and like, you know, kidnapped like that would be exactly the way to like incite the public to love her. Like it was so calculated, and she was playing off of that. Like I felt a little bit more like deep
exactly
that way.
That's what I mean by the level of awareness. It's a film that is about the roles we play and the narratives we like to believe. She is basically playing into narratives that people know are happy to accept, that they're like, I mean, the narrative of the woman with the, you know, the woman who had to like give up on her, compromise for her husband, the woman who had the abusive husband who cheated on her, the woman who, you know, was brutally taken and kidnapped. And it's all of these narratives and stories that are things that people are really into, like they will cling to because it's familiar and it's something they like. And she's smart and she's aware that people will do that, and then she uses it to her advantage. And I think that deep down it offends people to see a woman taking advantage of that and actually being like smart and kind of badass in a way, kind of terrifying but badass in a way.
I think to sort of tonally switch up what material we're dealing with, you're seeing a similar thing going on with the criticism of Kimmy Schmidt, where the portrayal of stereotypes is leading to a lot of, you know, recoiling at it. But that show sort of leans into those stereotypes and mines them for a more honest look at different people and a more revealing, like, examination of, you know, how we normally interpret other people with differences. And most of all, it does it in funny ways. That's a show that really makes me laugh rather than, you know, makes me bristle at the way that it depicts its characters.
I would agree with that, because like I read I think it was NPR wrote something about Kimmy Schmidt, and I thought it was a really just well thought out argument that talked about the issue. The main issue people bring up are two things. One is the one character played by Jane Krakowski being Native American who turned herself white, and people don't like that story, and they don't like that it's a white actress playing a Native American. And then you have the other Vietnamese character named Dong, who is like very, very stereotypical with the accent, and you know, he delivers Chinese food and stuff like that. And some of them just, you know, the argument is that, yeah, I mean, they have these characters that play on stereotypes and stuff like that, but they're also, it's a show about people who are on the fringes of society, who are outcasts, who are minorities. And these characters, yeah, they may have these little problematic portrayals, but they're the emotional anchors of the show. They're the people that you have sympathy for them, you root for them, you care for them. And that's important to realize, you know, it's not making fun of these characters, it's actually investing in the people you like.
And to only take away their stereotypes as their defining characteristics is looking at it in a sort of intentionally one-dimensional way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of shows get that kind of flag too. Like the Mindy Project got that when the like one black character on the show was just acting in such a like obvious way, and it was like, really? Come on.
Something that always annoyed me, I kind of thought about this quite a bit, was you know, when people attacked Lena Dunham and Girls because it was a very white show, and they were like, where's the diversity? It felt like any time ever since that, it felt like in the next seasons, anytime a minority character showed up, it felt like a direct response to those criticisms. And it kind of drove me, it just irked me a little bit, because I feel like I'm just more in favor of, you know, preserving, let's say, you know, just let the artist or person play out whatever vision they have. The problem with this is I feel like when people criticize shows like that for lack of diversity, the criticisms are always attacked directly towards, like, say, the star or the showrunner or the director or whatever, and it really should be directed more towards the people who are making these things happen, the people who are running the system. That's who's, it's like you guys are setting the precedent.
Especially when the conversation turns against people who are generally on the same team. You know, Tina Fey, for example, I would view as someone who generally encourages progressive thoughts and diversity on TV, even if she has her stumbles and there's problematic things about Kimmy Schmidt. Overall, I think she's someone worth supporting. No,
I'd love to see studios kind of be like, okay, the premise of a white 1%er getting sent to jail for a white collar crime, reaching out to a black man because he assumes he's been to jail, could be actually really funny and full of like opportunity for some pretty funny like satirical jokes, like things that actually do kind of draw attention to stuff that makes sense to be addressed. It's not like we're not dealing with race issues. He's white and Jewish, and that's fine, but it's just kind of like outside of that realm a bit. And like someone like Justin Simien, right, who did Dear White People last year, like that guy knows how to make some jokes that make you think and make you feel uncomfortable, but like they're really funny. And
okay, before I guess we have to wrap this up, I want to ask, because we've been talking about, you know, the whole thing, but I'm curious. I thought of this beforehand, but like, can you think of something? I guess recently would be better. Just something that actually like really did make you get like highly offended. I'm sure you guys have brought this up earlier, some examples, but an example like something where it's like you did watch and you were like, okay, yeah, that is. Like...
I would say watching Borat was one of the most uncomfortable experiences ever. And yes, I laughed because I was so uncomfortable. I didn't know what else to do. But like in retrospect, I really don't ever want to watch that movie again. The way it depicts like the poor people of Kazakhstan, like they hate that movie in that country, rightly so. And not to mention the stuff he does is just so uncomfortable, like, and he's trying to be uncomfortable, and I get that that's the sort of humor they're going for, but the cultural insensitivity, I can't handle it.
Bruno too, as well.
Yes.
Sure. What about you, Zach?
I saw a rerun of I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry recently, and it was too much for me to get through. I had to turn that one off. I just was browsing through it. I hadn't seen it since it was first in theaters, and I hated it. And I hated it even more now that I know more now. So that's a terrible one. But nothing really recently. I don't find myself that offended by too much.
I had to reach back a little bit. I'm not one to get like too overtly offended by stuff, I guess. The one that did pop up in my mind is such an obscure pick. It was a Russian film that played at the Cannes Film Fest. It's by, I can't pronounce his name, Andrei something. If Nicola was here, he'd pronounce it, because the guy directed Leviathan, which came out last year, and everyone adores that movie. Or Nicola does, at least. And it was a movie called Elena, and it had a lot of buzz behind it, and I think it won a prize at Cannes. And I saw it, and I was, like, flabbergasted by how offensively just straight up, like, I was like, this is like a Mitt Romney Ronald Reagan porno, like, because it's essentially about a woman who has a poor background. She's married to a very rich businessman who like built up his business, and her family are all like underclass on welfare, and she wants her husband to help them, and he's like, no, he just can't stand them. But the problem is the way that underclass is portrayed in this movie, they're like the worst people ever. They're like leeches. They don't care about anyone or anything. They're selfish. And there's like, the big stunning scene in the film is like one of the young kids goes off and randomly starts a brawl with a bunch of random people on the street. And it's like, is this how you're portraying like the welfare class? Like they're all just a bunch of hooligans who are just, they don't give a shit about anyone, and they're all out for themselves. And it was just like this highly offensive portrayal. I was like, why are people like into this movie? I thought it was so reductive and just insulting. It was just like, it really pissed me off watching it. Okay, on that lovely high note, I think
why did we end with this subject?
Oh man, what's the happiest thing you guys saw lately?
Well, I've got all these Tribeca pre-screening schedules to mine through and have my pick of the litter, so that makes me happy. And sometimes I just scroll up and
Tribeca
down.
Pre-screenings. Ananda,
well,
TV
I had
counts.
Yes, I'm going to say, I because we did our TV feature, check it out. We did all week long, 50 best TV shows to come out of the decade so far. And so I've been watching a lot of television lately, and have had also just, stressful work week. So I think I've been watching a lot of Adventure Time lately because it makes me really happy. It's like 11-minute episodes, and they're full of just optimism and funniness. And that's my go-to when I need a pick-me-up. So I've been watching a lot of Adventure Time lately.
Adventure Time is a good pick. I mean, I think I watched the first 2 seasons. I was always a fan of BMO.
Oh, so great.
I know, BMO's so adorable. So there you go. We ended on a happy note. There we go.
Yay.
Yay. So yeah, that wraps it up for this edition of the Way Too Indiecast. Before we go, I guess, Ananda, where can people find you on the internets?
Oh, geez. Google me. I'm all over the place. No, don't Google me. That's weird. You can find me on Twitter at Ananda Writes.
All right. And Zach, where can we find you? You have a few areas we can find you.
You can find me on Twitter at Zshevich. That's at ZSHEV as in VHSICH. Or you can find me on YouTube at youtube.com/multiplex show, where I do weekly video reviews and some other stuff. So find me there. Find me writing on Way Too Indie. Find me on this podcast, or Google me, or don't Google me.
Yeah. Why are we encouraging people to Google us?
Everyone, Google us. None of us have seen Citizen 4. Google away. Yes, and as I always say, you can find me on Twitter at CJ_Prin. That's at CJ_PRIN. Find Way Too Indie at Way Too Indie on Twitter. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. Please rate us. Leave a comment. We love to get comments. If they're nasty comments, sure. please be nice.
We are talking about offensiveness today.
Yeah,
if
we did something offensive, point it out.
If we are offensive talking about offensiveness, please be offensive in your offensive comment.
Yes, write a think piece comment about our offensiveness. Yeah, what else? So, and check out the site, www.waytooindie.com, of course. We just are wrapping up our 5-year anniversary month, which has been a really, really, really busy month, and I'm kind of glad it's over in that sense.
Oh my
Yeah, so although, as you could tell with Tribeca and other festivals coming up, it never ends.
It never ends.
But yeah, we got the great features from the month. We had the best 50 songs of the last 5 years, best 50 films of the last 5 years, and as of last week, best TV shows of the last 5 years. So we got a whole bunch of stuff going on the site, so check it out. But yeah, that about wraps it up for us. Come back next week. There will be another episode of the IndieCast online, and we'll be talking about movies and indie picks and a whole slew of other stuff.